Getting to 10% body fat seems extremely hard, otherwise everyone would do it, right? You might be thinking, is it even worth it? Do I need to get that lean? Will I have to give up all of my favorite foods? How long will this take? And what happens if I hit a plateau? If so, you're in the right place, and that's why in this video we're going to simplify this into 5 key steps you can follow. This is all I've used myself to do this every summer over the last decade, and it's exactly what we use with our clients as well. And the good news is, to get the look you want, 10% body fat isn't actually needed. But before we touch on that, let's dive into step 1, your nutrition. You've heard it a million times before, you can't out-train a bad diet. If we don't nail our eating, we won't ever get there. To lose body fat, we need to maintain a calorie deficit, which means consuming fewer calories than we burn each day. To work out how many calories you need to eat is super simple. Just Google TDEE calculator and pop in your starting stats, click lose body fat as your goal, and that will give you your starting calories. I also have my own you can use that I'll link in the description for you. This one will also give you the protein amount you need, which is key to getting the look you want. And this also prompts a very common question. Will I have to stop eating tasty food? Yes and no. Let me explain. Hunger and cravings are one of the biggest reasons people can't stick to their calories. Genetics and lifestyle factors do play a large role in this. We have 2 hormones called ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is our hunger hormone, leptin is our satiety hormone. Now all that fancy shit just means that the more these get out of whack, the harder it is to stick to your calories. And some people struggle with this more than others. And that's why I was saying genetics come into play. So there will be some trial and error in how much flexible foods you can have inside your daily calories without letting your hunger get out of control. And this is because generally speaking, non-processed foods are more filling. Things like fruits, berries, potatoes, lean meats, and things like that are much more satiating compared to things like lollies and chocolates. But there's a balance, because if you take all of your favorite foods away, this will create too much restriction and cause you to binge. So the first few weeks, trial some different foods, see what works best for you. Me personally, I aim for 90% filling foods, chicken, steak, white potato, oats, and fruit. Then I'll leave room for tasty things like protein ice cream. And then there's things like overnight Weet Bix, which are extremely tasty, high protein, and filling. This is what I call the golden meals. But it still leads us to a very common mistake, which is step number 2, expectations. How long is it really going to take to get down to 10% body fat if I'm starting around 30% body fat? Now, this will depend on a few factors. Everyone's different, but to be 100% honest, it's probably gonna take anywhere from 6 to 12 months. Now that's because in this time period, you're gonna have social events, birthdays, weddings, holidays, you might get sick, and life can throw you curveballs and make it harder. You might even want a diet break halfway through. But the good news is, as I mentioned, to get that lean look you want, 10% body fat is not completely necessary. And as you get leaner and leaner, it gets much harder. Fat loss is slower and there is far less room for error and slip-ups. But this is good news, because if you follow the steps in this video, the weight will come off fast at the start, and that's great for motivation. To give you a rough guide how this looks in the real world, here's a few of my client examples and their timelines. Jovan went from about 30% to around 12% body fat. This took a full year, but as you can see by these progress pics, he started seeing physical changes as soon as 20 days in. Then a few months later, even more progress, and then more, and so on. Alex, he just started around 20 to 25% body fat. I'm just guessing these percentages based on this chart here. You can use this as a good guide too. With Alex, we went hard on the fat loss phase and managed to strip off 13.5 kg in 12 weeks. And that ended him up at about 12 to 15% body fat, as you can see here. And in my opinion, he looks fucking epic. This is why I said 10% body fat might not be necessary for the look you want, because although this wasn't easy for Alex, to go from this point down to 10% or less would be way harder than the initial 13.5 kg that he lost. Next, we got Irvin. Now, this only took 4 weeks because, as you can see, he has a shitload of muscle and he wasn't high body fat to begin with. Reece dropped 20 kg and this took him 6 months. I would say he's pretty damn close to 10% body fat in these after pics here. And Reece also said it was extremely hard to get that last 5 kg off, but also the most rewarding and satisfying thing he's done, as it completely changed his entire lifestyle habits and he found a new level of discipline. As you can see, based on my client examples, I personally think anywhere from 10 to 15% body fat for men looks insanely good, and puts your physique in the top 5% of guys. Last example we have the big dog. Braden took 5 months to go from around 20%, maybe a touch higher body fat, to a very close 10%. To be honest, I'd probably say that's 10% body fat. The benefit here is Braden had a solid foundation of muscle to begin with, and he was experienced in training. He just had a little bit of time off, which actually left to some of those little newbie gains, or nice little rebound gains, as I like to call it. And that leads us to step 3, which is the most overlooked rule, and that's training. Without weight training, getting to that 10 to 15% body fat is not only going to be much harder, it won't provide the look you want. Without muscle, you'll just end up looking like a skinny udon noodle. Not ideal. The good news is you'll see epic progress even when training as little as 3 times per week. Now, if you can commit to 4 or 5, that's optimal, but it needs to be sustainable for you. All the client examples I just went through, they were training at least 4 times per week, if not 5. Next up, don't stress over all the nuances to training, as it'll just lead and add to the overwhelm and you probably won't even start. I would honestly just aim to train every muscle at least 1 to 2 times per week. Just put in tons of effort, train hard, and you'll be golden. So what happens if I hit a plateau? Well, before we touch on that, we need to dive into step 4, as this will be needed for breaking that plateau, and it's steps and cardio. Not only is a higher step count and cardio extremely beneficial for your heart and overall longevity, it'll help strip off the body fat as well. But in my experience, cardio is one of the reasons most people don't start in the first place. They dread it, boring, and I get it. I agree. So if you have a sport you enjoy, make this your cardio. If you don't, then I would highly recommend using a daily step target. And to be honest, I would probably do this even if you are playing sports or you're doing cardio alongside your weight training. The reasons it works so well are, number 1, it's accurate and easy to track. You can get yourself a smartwatch. You can even get dedicated step trackers and just wear that every day if you wanted to. Number 2, increasing daily steps will allow you to burn more calories and therefore eat more food on your deficit, which is always a massive bonus compared to if you were doing less daily steps. Number 3, they're easy to increase with simple things like parking further away, cleaning your house, walking around whilst you're on the phone instead of sitting down at work if you're allowed to, and even a 10-minute walk after each meal. Things like this will help a ton, and that one also helps your digestion. And by the way, roughly every 10 minutes of decent paced walking equals about 1,000 steps. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to rack up an extra 2,000-3,000 steps a day if you implement those things. Number 4, it can help you break plateaus because eventually you will hit one. Now, when you do hit a plateau and the fat is no longer coming off, you have to lower your calories some more, increase your steps or output some more, or a combo of both. I would personally try to increase steps more if you can. That way you can keep eating the same amount of food. And for me, I would aim for at least about a 2,000 step increase per day. So if you're currently doing 7,000 steps, instead of lowering your food, you can go to 9,000 and so on. And like we just mentioned, that would equate to about 20 minutes of walking per day, which is not too bad. If this isn't doable because of your work and schedule, then I would simply lower your calories by about 10%. Now, what if you fall off track, have a binge, or accidentally slip and inhale 3 pints of Ben & Jerry's? Well, this is step 5, ditching the all or nothing mindset. If you dropped your phone and it got a little crack in the screen, would you then smash it with a hammer? In my experience, the shorter the time between you going YOLO and smashing some cookies and the time that it takes you to get straight back on track to your normal calories and eating is one of the biggest indicators for success. And we can always see this with clients from day one. If they do this and they get straight back on, we know they're going to get insane progress. All of the client examples I just showed, when they had a meal off plan, slammed a couple of beers with the boys or inhaled a Whopper, the difference was they immediately got straight back to normal eating after that meal. Not even that day or that weekend, the next meal, straight back to normal eating. The key is, don't smash your phone if you drop it. Now, after you got shredded, you're loving the new look, life is good, but there's one problem. How do you start to eat more food and increase your calories without going back to square one? Well, watch this video next and I'll explain the 4 keys to make sure that doesn't happen.